This is Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready. We're about to live in your head rent-free.
Hello, Otterites. This is episode 240. I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
I'm Francis.
I'm Marcus.
And I'm Andre.
Hey, we are comfortably ensconced here. What do you call this, Robert?
This is the man cave version of Studio R.
Okay.
There you go.
Cool.
We'll take that.
We are down here in the
dungeon?
basement. I prefer basement.
Oh, okay.
I call it dungeon whenever I'm complaining to the wife about not being able to have any sunlight when I work, because my office is in the other half, and as you can see, there are no windows on that side.
I thought it was because of the handcuffs hanging from the ceiling.
No, that's just decoration.
Oh, okay.
That's the red room.
So,
We don't go in there, and we're not.
Yeah, you're not allowed in there.
We're
Not
not
allowed in the back.
We're not recording in the part with the leather straps and the handcuffs. So, listeners, this is a return to a philosophy episode.
Woohoo!
And this is one that we've been needing to cover. This is absurdism, as expounded by Albert Camus. And guys, I'd like to have a little structure to this episode, which I know is not our strong suit.
We'll do our best. Can't promise, but we'll do our best.
Yeah, that's a tall order, right? So we're not having bourbon then. See, you're already off the rails.
Yeah. But I want to touch on Camus first a bit. We've done that when we did a Camus quote, so we won't dive too much into that. But context is important, so you got to do a little context.
Context is king.
Amen.
And then discuss what absurdism is, and I've got a couple of things that in kind of real life pieces that to me help illustrate the appeal of absurdism. And we also want to finally talk about what would be termed the classical responses to a realization that the world is absurd. So,
Okay.
Camus first. As we discussed in the past, he is a Frenchman, but
Pied Noir.
He is what's called a Pied Noir. He was born in Algeria, and Algeria was not viewed as like a colony of France. It was viewed as a department of France. You were on real French soil,
Kind of like Puerto Rico.
But of course,
Only Puerto Ricans have more rights.
the
to
European,
vote.
French in Algeria treated the actual African Algerians like garbage.
Right.
As
In true European fashion.
as is typical.
Yeah.
And so there's a a conflict for him. He despised that treatment of other people, but he was a European Frenchman.
Right. He
enjoyed
benefited
the privilege.
Yeah.
Well, sort of. He was from an extremely poor family.
Yes.
So he had the rights, but being poor, he probably could not access a lot of them compared to the ruling class.
Yeah.
So he was probably in everyday life much closer to the native Algerians.
Yes.
Which
And-
is probably where his
well,
sympathy comes from.
sympathy
Well,
comes
his grandmother was rather disappointed because after he had developed tuberculosis, he went to live with his uncle. And
Well, yeah, he couldn't work the farm. That's
Well, she wanted him to be a manual laborer,
right.
so he was a disappointment in the eyes of his grandmother.
But he
Very old school.
Yes.
he was a real French patriot. He was a member of the French underground and opposed Nazism, was not a collaborator. Now, when you say a part of the underground, again, he had tuberculosis. He's not sneaking up on Nazi sentries and blowing up rail yards.
Now they'd hear him coming a mile away.
Yeah, but he is writing. By that time, he was already a recognized, famous writer in France, and wrote extensively as part of the French resistance and the French underground.
He was the editor of Combat, I believe was the newspaper.
Underground newspaper, yeah.
And anybody who is an intellectual in Europe was a communist for about 20 minutes, especially one who gets caught up in something like the Algerian Civil War, rebellion, etc.
Or the Spanish Civil War.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but he pushed Marxist-Leninism aside. It was not appealing to him long term. Again, he is very much a kind of an individualist,
He's a libertarian socialist.
yeah, sort of kind of. I mean, in the U.S., he would be kind of that odd duck libertarian.
Mhm.
Taxation is theft. Who's we don't need the government to pave the roads kind of guy.
But he was still a leftist. I mean, he was still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The description you offer sounds like an anarchist.
Well, yes.
He's not far
well,
from
but-
that. He's not far.
But
yeah.
he did want one world government. He was one who was pushing for a united Europe before
Before the
all
United
this.
Nations.
Well,
yes.
as he realized very early, which is what Americans have realized, and it's probably even though I've never seen anything explicitly talk about it, part of the reasoning behind the Marshall Plan is to create economic allies as opposed to political rivals, and that's what he's looking at.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because when
And
you
he's-
trade with
he's-
people, it's
he's-
kind of hard to go to war with them.
Yeah, I mean, he's very future
Moralist.
Yeah, a very prescient type of guy. And I always call him kind of an honorary American because he died in a car crash,
Yes.
just like James Dean and Jane Mansfield. And
Just like all good Americans.
so Camus is this kind of, again, it's sort of a contradiction, sort of conflicted, a little bit of everything. And
I think his death was a great loss, not specifically for his contributions, because it's hard to say philosophers have huge contributions, but having died so young, he did not have a chance to finish working out his philosophy, and I think that's why you see him
Well-
with such a mess of contradictions, because he is all over the map still.
Well,
And he died at 46.
mhm.
Yep.
But when he died, he had already written the piece of his his memoir
Mhm.
was already written. The manuscript was in the car when he died. That's where they
yeah,
found
well,
it.
his publisher was driving.
Yeah.
They were driving back to
And
Paris.
the publisher was killed too.
Yeah. And what he tended to do to illustrate his thinking would be to write a novel, a
Mhm.
play, and then
Same.
a large essay that were all sort of joined.
Very classical approach to philosophy,
Yeah.
in many ways,
Mhm.
in that respect.
In current day, we would call building your brand on multiple fronts.
In many ways, yeah.
And to be fair, he was for rebellion. He was for resistance, but
But not for the sake of it.
yes,
That's the thing.
But he was also against the violence.
Yes.
He didn't want the idea, the idea of bombing trains or what have you. He was totally against all that kind of terrorism and stuff like that too.
Well, he's famous. There was a quote he was written in one of his works: "Is I revolt, therefore we exist."
Mhm.
So can you truly say that he was?
Well, we're going to get to that. There's something specific about that as it relates to his thought. So
Mhm.
that's the part we're going to hit at the end.
Okay.
So
Definitely, you're on the right track.
lay out the structure real, because I have something I was going to bring up. I want to make
Yeah.
sure we stick within your structure.
Yes.
So lay it out how you want to examine this, if you would.
So we just did our kind of Camus background here. I'm getting ready to wrap that up.
Very general
Yeah.
context.
Context. We're going to talk what is absurdism.
Okay, that's exactly what I want to talk about next.
Yeah, and then at the end, we're going to talk to what's considered sort of the classical responses,
Mhm.
the
Cool.
3 classical responses to absurdism.
You got this all planned out.
Assuming we can actually stay on track.
Assuming we can get there and watch the time and
Right.
And consume bourbon along the way.
and this bourbon
consume
that,
bourbon,
that
yeah.
you poured
Check.
is pretty good, so I'm already hitting it pretty hard.
Yes. Yes, because we as always, Brother Andre wanted to make sure we mention this for that we are recording in the morning as we are wont to do. And yes, we do start our
Yeah.
episodes early in the morning. We started about 9:30 this morning,
Yes.
and we all are having bourbon. But you can't do snakes and otters without bourbon.
And,
Yeah.
But we have a big breakfast every time.
Yeah.
Snakes and otters means day drinking.
yes,
Exactly.
That's
and
okay. We have a breakfast bourbon to discuss.
Yes,
we have a
and,
breakfast
Martin's already slurring his roll.
It's good stuff.
Well, I tell you what, I was thinking about this before we came down. Normally, we are carb heavy on breakfast, which helps soak up the bourbon. We were not carb heavy today.
We were
No.
protein heavy
We
today.
were very protein heavy. So it's going to be interesting to see how the bourbon
Yeah.
hits
Yeah,
us.
it's going to
Oh,
be,
yes.
be a little woozy.
So, anyways, absurdism. So let's talk about that.
So absurdism, follows right along kind of the trail where you have existentialism, nihilism, things like that. But absurdism is the notion that the world, the universe that we live in, is irrational,
Mm-hmm.
and that there's no real construct to it.
There's
You know,
no meaning or purpose
right.
behind it.
You know, the point of philosophy to that point had been, well, let's use an interrogative method to discover rationally what our world is about,
Mm-hmm.
what the structure of our universe is. And absurdism basically goes, that's pointless because there isn't one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so,
Who farted?
That's it. That's the basic. It's philosophers going to the
right.
universe.
And certainly when you go from Kant, Nietzsche, this is a lot of this draws from Kierkegaard. It follows on from Sartre.
Was a contemporary and a sometimes friend.
Yeah, and a lot of what Camus came up with was bouncing back and forth with Sartre. And so for me, this feels very appealing. And I know
I
that's
thought it would.
a contradiction because it shouldn't be. It should be freaking depressing. But for me, it's kind of what makes sense. That 8 billion people are running around doing whatever they want and constructing our world, and that there isn't really a purpose and a structure. We're just kind of we're there, and we've got to deal with what everybody else.
So what makes
is
sense is
imposing.
the exact fact that there is no sense to be made.
Yes.
It sounds like absurdism is a very
Yes.
entropic philosophy seeking disorder and not order.
I don't know that it necessarily seeks
Seeks it,
disorder,
right,
but
right.
I think it
Except
sees disorder
recognize
as the natural result of the universe.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, it is very much entropy centered in that respect.
I was going to use that word. Yes, entropy is the key element. With
And,
that.
you
And
know-
it requires energy in opposing forces to impose order.
Yeah, and for us as Americans, and that's where most of our listeners come from. The people in Singapore aside.
We
Yeah.
love our Singapore
Yes.
listeners.
Yeah, and the few people in Germany who like to listen to the Habsburg episode over and over, apparently,
Das ist sehr gut, jawohl.
because it is still the most popular episode. My God, but to us, absurdism at first it's a hard term to wrap our heads around because we do not think of things that are absurd in the way that he means.
Right.
We would think of it for us to consider it in the way he means. We would think that is an ironic use of the word.
Yes.
But it's really not. Our use of the word is more ironic. We think
Yes.
of it as just stuff that's just silly.
Right. I mean, to us, it's Monty Python.
Yeah,
Right.
Stop being silly.
Yes.
Right. Which is an outgrowth of what his meaning is.
Oh yeah. I mean,
But we have
example
lost
of it.
that.
yeah. What he did and his thought then influences modern culture.
Yes.
I think to a great degree. His his standing example is the myth of Sisyphus.
Yes.
Right.
Sisyphus was a king sentenced by Zeus to roll a boulder uphill in the afterlife. And when he got it to the top of the hill, it would roll back down. And so
You have to start all over.
his job was to start all over. And that it's not just his sentence, but his acceptance of that sentence is the basis of the absurdist philosophy. That you understand, yes, this is pointless, but I got to do it anyway. And so let me give you a couple of things that come to my mind through our discussions that help me focus on this topic. So, listeners, as you know, 3 of the Brotherhood here are men of very deep faith. And I admire the 3 of them a great deal. As you know, I've known Robert and Francis forever and ever. And I've often called Francis my hero.
Yes, and I'm honored.
And even in the short time I've known Brother Andre, his basic decency and generosity of spirit are very impressive. And So I have to admit, though, that I am not really a person of faith. I admire them a great deal for that, but I just don't have it.
See, I think that anybody who actually believes in anything, even if it's something that there is no meaning, I think that takes a great deal of faith.
Yeah.
I really do.
Well, I'm from the Ferris Bueller school.
Yeah. You don't believe in isms,
I believe in myself. I could be the walrus, but I'd still have to bum rides off people.
right?
Mhm.
Which is actually not true because you're the one giving rides in college.
Yes.
So, when the Imperator wasn't trying to hijack your vehicle to pick up chicks,
I know, yeah. Oh, we've got the
Wasn't-
Pontiac. Who's we?
wasn't
Almost.
wasn't necessarily to pick them up, as opposed to
'Cause I
what might
knew-
happen to them.
I was gonna say I knew how that was gonna end. I'd be driving him around town with two girls in the back seat. So anyway, what I don't understand about that strikes me as absurd, though, is there are other people who also are not people of faith, and we've discussed. I know you studied one of them with your divinity studies and all, Francis. People that tear down, that they built careers around the idea of I have to destroy your faith.
yes, Richard Dawkins.
Richard
I was gonna
Dawkins,
say,
exactly,
Dawkins
that's
is the one.
I mean, Christopher Hitchens
Yes.
or people.
Well,
like
and
that.
they were all spiritual air quotes
Yes.
children of Kierkegaard.
Yes, yeah. I mean, so to me, that's the building of a world of absurdity. Why does the faith of men like Robert and Francis and Brother Andre damage you in any way? Why is it necessary for you not just to oppose it, but to build a whole career on it? It's just dumb.
Well,
I mean, just respect other people and go, okay, well, I don't, that's not in my makeup, but I don't get that.
It's almost an absurd evangelical bent on their
It is.
part.
It
It's,
is.
They're basically
And-
saying what you're doing is evil and must be stopped.
well, and that I think is where Camus, why he broke with Marxist Leninists,
right.
Yeah.
is because they were too authoritarian.
Yeah,
Well,
totalitarian.
you're right.
yeah.
You
And-
can't have any belief before Marx. And,
Right.
You know,
So
that's the only thing you may believe in.
It's like much of modern, what we call postmodern leftist thinking, in that, and we're all familiar with this because it started out in America. We call it the woke culture, but what it's really about is not just that they think we're wrong and they're right. Talking about those who are
Yeah.
against faith, but that we not only must give up our faith, we must accept their view of things and like it.
And
In a way, it's almost like being married.
And- and
You
it-
gotta like what your wife likes, for the same
Yeah.
reason she likes it.
I did, just to be fair, I did not say anything about that. Okay.
But it goes further. That it's a belief, though, that the world would be better if
Yes.
your faith was destroyed.
Right, and
That
that's
makes
but I think
no
that's part of it.
sense.
That is very
all.
much part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Well, there's
need-
an egalitarian presumption in your view of that they simply do not share.
Well, because they're
Um,
they talk about being egalitarian, but it's only for those who think rightly.
It's the Bell Oxmic school. Yeah.
Yes.
They got to be the unity.
Yes.
Yeah. It's
Brother
very elitist.
I was just going to say the need to destroy another viewpoint that is not inflicting harm on yours indicates a deep insecurity in or jealousy in the other
Yes.
faith that there
Yes.
might be
I
truth
think
in
that- I
there.
think
There's
that in-
jealousy is, I think, the
There's-
happiness, the contentment
Yes.
of someone of faith.
Because
Well, they also couch it as that it does do harm,
Mhm.
because what they see
Yeah.
as harm is the influence that we have in the world,
I mean,
and
you know,
they
if you-
think that
yeah.
Yeah, and the evils that have been wrought by members of said church. They,
Yes.
they'll
I mean,
always go
yeah.
straight
right,
to that.
Right. I mean, if you want to oppose Joel Osteen or Jerry Falwell or something, that's one thing. But to me, that's an individual example that you would say, look, this is a person who isn't really a part of the faith.
Well, and you
But to
have
take
to go
and
back.
then
Yeah.
to go the next step and try to destroy the faith that is behind, other people who aren't that. It just doesn't make any sense.
Having read quite a bit of Christopher Hitchens, I'm a bit of a masochist when it comes to this. When I go
I
on
was going to say, bless you, sir.
well,
yeah.
one of my things when I go on a spiritual retreat is I'll always bring one of his books with me because it's kind of like wrestling with the devil.
Right. It engages your mind.
It really
in
is,
those
and I
topics,
always look
yes.
because I abhor Dawkins because I think he's just mean spirited. But Hitchens is well spoken and well reasoned. He's
Yes.
And may he rest in peace. I'll go ahead and say that for
In the
it's
fires of hell.
No. I pray for his salvation because I think the man was brilliantly intelligent, and his critiques of the sins given are usually spot on. But he goes to that point to say, therefore you must be destroyed, that you are evil, you're bringing evil onto this. Well, if you're talking about cults of personality and dogmatic blind dogma and things like that, okay, we can have that conversation. But if you go back to Jesus Christ's teachings,
But usually, though, it's not.
they can't refute that.
It's not the blind obedience to the dogma or the dogmas themselves that they object to. It's those who do evil while proclaiming to be saints.
Right. Well, yeah, and the
And
hypocrisy.
it's the hypocrisy that
Yeah.
He does both in
They
his
go
works.
They go that too
and
far. Yeah.
Jesus did the same thing. He's being very Christ-like in that. You call out the hypocrisy. If you're going to believe, then you act a certain way according to that belief. And his critiques of those who do not, we would share.
Well, and if you it's a very bad way to think of things for a lot of reasons. One, it ignores the good that the church does.
Correct, and that's where he always goes.
But
everything's negative and nothing's
If
positive.
you use that as your principle, then you almost have to go to the thinking of Camus
That's right.
as your adoptive and guiding philosophy, because every ism, especially on the left, has done great evil. You look at Pol Pot, Mao, Stalin, Lenin, the purges, all of the death that has come out of the leftist side of political and social philosophy. So then you have to say, well, all of those isms have to be destroyed, and then what are we left with? We are left with no meaning. Man cannot live without meaning.
Entropy is what you're left with.
Yeah, that's
very
basically what I said.
Yeah.
You're left with
Exactly.
absurdism.
So
But I don't think man can live without meaning, because even Camus, he was a moralist.
yeah,
If you were truly fully absurd,
he found
he wouldn't even
meaning.
have been a moralist.
Yeah, he found meaning in opposing fascism.
Right.
He found meaning in being a French patriot.
Right. So really, I guess you could say really absurdism is not that there is no meaning. There is no meaning except what we make.
Right. I mean, it's unknowable.
Mm-hmm.
It's irrational. You have to accept that the world is irrational.
He rejects the concept of eternal questions, basically, that have
Right.
answers.
And
that have answers.
that seeking for them is kind of pointless because
Yeah.
you're not going to find them.
Yeah. So in a way, our tagline is almost Camusian.
I love that word. Yeah.
Camusian?
Camusian, yeah. So here's the other though. I'm going to flop it on you two, or you three as well. So at its core, as Francis quite astutely points out, Christianity is astoundingly simple.
Yes.
In many
It
ways,
should be.
yes. In many
At its
ways.
core, yes.
That's right.
It's Christ is the path. And
That is true. Yeah, if you want,
and
if
love,
you want,
and love everyone.
yeah. Well, I mean, that flows from.
Yeah.
that's
yes, right.
that's a flow for. But salvation is through Christ.
Period.
That's it. But in building a church, then that requires structure and doctrine and dogma and
Human administration.
administration, and which leads to schism and heresy and
Alexander the Sixth, that is at its worst.
And
Yeah.
and the fact that humans are inherently flawed.
and that 2,000 years later, all of that builds up, and you have to fire the Archbishop of Knoxville for being an asshole.
Wow, you went there. Whoa.
Whoa.
You pay attention, don't you, Martin?
For a man of no faith, you are the most faithful Catholic I know.
He is the most Catholic.
Well,
Atheist.
I pay attention to what you all talk about.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
that's
true.
So,
true.
for listeners, if you're unfamiliar, the Archbishop of Nashville,
Now,
Knoxville.
now
Knoxville.
former,
Knoxville.
now
Knoxville.
former,
a couple of years ago ended up resigning.
under scandal.
Yes.
Oddly enough, it was kind of a priest rebellion, which just does not happen.
Yeah, that does not happen.
It does
Right.
not happen.
That's
but
what made it
a
happen. Yeah.
group of priests of the Knoxville diocese applied to Rome for the
Relief.
archbishop's removal.
Will
For
no
the
one
benefit
save
of
us
the
from this
people.
felonious priest,
And
bishop?
And the reason that kind of is a sort of a story here is because the Archbishop of Louisville kind of oversees, isn't really like the boss of
He has,
Knoxville.
yeah.
Kind of, it's a larger diocese than Knoxville. It's kind of under the purview.
It's called the Metropolitan, and he's basically just kind of a consultant. But
Mm-hmm.
when things go off the rails, he's the first line of defense.
Yes. So
All metropolitans are.
Francis has had to accompany Louisville's
Our current
Archbishop,
yes.
Sheldon Fobb, to Knoxville until they were able to appoint a new one.
Yeah, which happened, quite a few months back.
Yeah,
It's
been
within the
several
last
months.
year. Though.
It was July of
Yeah.
last
Yes.
year. Yeah.
So it is all resolved now, but
Yes, and understand
I
Bishop
said, it's-
Beckman is very well beloved. He was a priest from Knoxville, and
He had the bar set really low for him.
This
very
just
well
goes
put.
to prove the point of what we were talking about. People looking at obscure one-offs and setting that as a precedent. The fact that there was a bishop who was challenged with leadership and guidance of a diocese
yes.
is extremely rare.
Oh, it's
It is.
super
So-
unusual.
Well, yeah, but I think what people
So why
like,
didn't Kurtz deal with this?
Well,
he
this is
did. There was some. Kurtz was doing some dealing with that.
Before he retired.
There was a the protests were made
He was part of the investigation.
part of
Should've
part of a
been easy.
previous investigation. That is
Yes.
correct.
So, it's not that. Stop interrupting me. I lose my train of thought. It's not that people look at something like this one bad bishop and that Dawkins and Hitchens have the problem with. What they have the problem with, they focus because it is an absolute horror, greatest sin you can possibly think of, is the pedophile scandals.
Yes.
That's correct. It usually
Because
goes back to that.
it's not a one-off like this
Right.
bishop was.
Yeah.
It was systemic in many places.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in some places, even where it looks systemic, a lot of that was following the advice of professionals at the time. And then, of course, you get dinged for it later.
Yeah.
Which it may or may not be fair. It's hard to say. Obviously, it ended up being the wrong thing to do to follow that advice.
Period.
But,
Mm-hmm.
that's what they did.
yeah, I mean,
As opposed to then there were some who just moved guys around to hide it because they were either okay with it or just didn't want to have to deal with the fallout.
Yeah.
Or they thought they could move them to a place where they wouldn't continue their behavior. If you had a pedophile priest, you put
people
them in
didn't
a,
understand
and they
that
were-
behavior.
they
Yes,
put them in
that
a
was
They thought it
old
was a
age home.
curable thing.
That was not
It's
unique to the church. That was you
Yes.
can look back to
Oh, yeah.
back to
Yeah, I mean, the
Numerous
philosophy at that time.
organizations.
That's right. And there were many others. And what
well,
people fail to
education.
realize, you look for predators of this stripe.
Mhm.
Look for hunting grounds where they can thrive.
Yes.
And when you go someplace that has access to these children, and you have a cult of personality where you are king and are not ever questioned, it's of course going to attract them like ringing the dinner bell.
Yes.
So it's a complicated
It is.
issue.
It's
But
kinda
those
like-
kind of things, because it was so widespread, that's
Yeah.
the kind of thing they look at. And it wasn't just the U.S. I mean,
Correct.
this sort of thing. And you can say, well, a lot of people who have that predilection, they sought out the church because
Well.
they thought it was a safe place
Right.
So
Absolutely.
to both be and also to find their
Hunt fresh
the,
game.
the predators went to where the game was.
Exactly.
yes.
So they had access, unfettered access
Well,
to
And-
children, and they
and-
abused
And in a
their
position
office.
of authority that gave them a veneer of respectability.
Credibility.
and a way to avoid
I mean, but-
questioning. And
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
This
yeah.
is prevalent not just in churches, but you're looking at
Yes.
every
Schools.
organization that involves children, schools, and it's not the first of the of various religious
The-
faiths and what have you. Perfect example: Gandhi,
Mm.
blatant child molester.
Well, there
Muhammad-
goes all of our listeners in
Muhammad.
India.
All right,
Muhammad,
hold,
another.
hold those thoughts.
Now
And there
I'm gonna
goes
be
all of
hunted
the
down.
listeners in Saudi Arabia.
Hold those thoughts. So again, that's a very veneer, top level,
Yes.
off the skin kind of discussion of what is absurdism.
as we are
Again,
wont
the
to.
myth of Sisyphus. Again, a couple of examples
Mhm.
from real life that strike me as yes, we're constructing a world that doesn't make any sense because everybody's constructing their own at one time.
And a rabbit hole.
And a rabbit hole. Let's stop there, and let's do bourbon break.
Bourbon break.
Thank you, Robert.
What a captain we have in
Francis,
Sure.
can you pass that bottle on? I've been sipping on this. I need to top it
Martin.
off.
Mr. Howard,
for
Mr. Howard, the bottle
uh,
stands by you.
I guess I want to sniff this.
because
too.
this is really good.
So,
Yes.
Robert, you and I and Francis are all having this, right?
Well,
We
I'm
are,
gonna-
yes. We cracked his bottle
I'm going to sniff it.
of,
So
of
this
Heaven,
is-
Heaven Hill bottled in
Thank
bond.
you.
Yes, Heaven Hill Bottled and Bond, the blue label. Been seeing it everywhere.
Aged 8 years, I believe.
Oh my goodness, 8 years.
Is this a recent release of theirs?
7 years.
7. I, thought it was
It's-
eight.
I don't
It was
remember
almost
seeing
7.
it before, but that doesn't.
Yeah, it's
it's-
within the last years when
Yeah,
I've been
I
seeing
thought,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, it's fairly new. I do see it out everywhere. It's about a $50 bottle.
Yes, I got mine for $47.99 or $48.99
Yeah,
at
yeah.
Kroger's.
If
It
you
is
catch a good sale, it's under 50.
Yeah, it's a
Right.
beautiful bottle, which, hey, it matters.
Yeah.
It does.
So I have really enjoyed it. Mellow, smooth, kind of sort of almost like a kind of a touch of a root beer candy kind of flavor to it almost, but not that sweet.
I was going to say, I'm not getting that much sweetness.
Yeah, I'm
on
not
it.
getting because that would be a little bit of ginger in it, I think. And
I'm getting
not
pepper.
that, but I'm
I'm
a
getting-
little bit. But it is definitely very sweet on the mouth.
Yeah,
Weeded.
it's it
Is it weeded? Smells weeded.
Possibly.
It doesn't
I
say
don't
on the
know.
bottle.
doesn't say, but
With the peppery taste that's in it, I'm betting it's not because usually if you have wheat, you don't have rye.
Right, and that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
is it's got
And yeah, and this
A
is
little
not a.
Very licoricey kind of almost.
no, that's a
Yeah, which-
possibility. Yeah, that's
yeah, so it does give me a little like kind of a hard candy sort of sugar sweet, but not super duper sweet.
usually 100 proof has a bite to it. This does not at all. And of course,
It's-
I've let mine
Yeah,
bloom.
no, it
so
does. It
it's-
does. It doesn't smell.
Yeah,
like
it
it's
is
got a
very
bite.
I
smooth.
mean, basically, I've already
Uh,
chugged mine down. So
If you want to top it off a little bit, feel free.
no, we got yet another episode to do. So
Well, see, I'm not going anywhere. I can drink all day.
I've still got to go see Tater Salad tonight. So I got to
Oh, that's
straighten
right.
up.
That's right.
So, Brother Andre, and I know you poured something really that you're enjoying.
I am enjoying this immensely. This is a niche bourbon, I would guess. It is a flavored bourbon, Knob Creek Smoked Maple. As we mentioned, we started recording at 9:30 this morning, and it's okay that I'm drinking bourbon because this is a breakfast bourbon.
Yes, I call this my breakfast bourbon. It smells like sausage and pancakes to me.
When you take
Oh,
the
yeah.
initial taste, you all said you didn't get a lot of sweetness in yours. That's all.
It's
I'm
all in
getting.
that bottle.
It's right there.
The-
Yeah,
the-
that's right.
The maple, the
We,
sweetness.
as you can see, there's very little left in the bottle.
That bottle's a
because-
couple of years old.
Yeah,
at
because
least.
we drank the absolute, you know what, out of it for several episodes that we.
Yeah,
at least I did. I
Well,
don't-
yes, when it was just the three of us and we were doing it 4 times a year at everybody's house.
Yeah.
You know,
we
hit
hit that one hard.
We
and
hit it
was-
hard, yeah.
'cause It was.
matter of fact, since you like so much and there's so little left, have at it. Go ahead and take it home. Finish that bottle off for me.
I will, but this is going in the collection because I'm going to go purchase another bottle of that.
Mhm.
Because
It is well worth it. Yes.
recently I tried a Screwball, which is peanut butter whiskey. Did not care for it.
Yeah, I've had peanut butter bourbon before. Not a big
Ugh.
fan.
Yeah, but
It's okay.
this is the first flavored niche bourbon I've had. It does not have a burn. It has a velvety mouthfeel.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Highly
Knob
recommend
Creek's
this
good
one.
for that.
Yes, it's almost a little too sweet if you're not prepared for that.
Knob Creek is one of these standards.
Yeah.
out
Oh,
there.
yes.
It was one of those first 4.
You know, it's
of
interesting.
those premium bourbons.
Knob Creek in some circles does not have a high reputation, and
No.
I do not understand.
Really?
I
that.
don't understand that. It's
I don't
Yes,
understand.
I've seen people knock it.
I've never been a huge fan.
Well,
And-
regular Knob Creek 9-year-old. I think is
Oh my God! A
awesome.
How can you go wrong with a 9-year bottle of bourbon that is under $40?
And that-
oh, by the
gosh.
way, we
Love
just
it.
lost all of our Irish listeners too because I follow this channel on YouTube called Try Channel. It's based in Ireland, and it's people trying different foods and
God
Yeah.
save Ireland.
spicy, and it's very funny. They tried Knob Creek bourbon one day, and they were just rolling, dying laughing. In the vernacular of Ireland, knob is a euphemism for penis.
Yes,
Yes.
it's here too.
It is
Yeah.
here too.
Knob goblins.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind. Evidently, my
You've never heard that?
My inexperience.
You really are the most sheltered of us.
That's like one of these days I'm going to go to. As a matter of fact, you've got tomorrow. Everybody's going to go up to Gobbler's Knob to hang out with the Knob Gobblers.
Okay.
On that, let's.
So, anyway,
Well, Knob Creek,
is good
it is
stuff.
named for an actual creek, guys, in
Yes.
Elson County. Lincoln played in that. It was very close to his boyhood home.
it is Knob Creek is
so, are
really
you
one of the.
accusing Lincoln of being a knob gobbler?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
No,
it-
but there may be some Lincoln urine in your Knob Creek.
No, that's already been washed
You think so?
downstream.
All of it. Well,
yeah. But Knob Creek, it's a beam product, and
Mhm.
it is one of the better lines. I've also got a 12-year up there. I don't have any of the regular 9-year currently,
No.
but I also have a 120 proof that's aged at just a little over 10 years.
Yeah.
And I've yet to crack that bottle.
It and Basil Hayden are the two premiums that they released right around 92. And they've expanded both those brands because you can get like 8 or 9 iterations of both of them.
Yeah.
Booker's came out at the same time,
Yeah.
but they don't do that one as much. It's kind of stayed on its own.
Unfortunately, no. Well, it's considered a higher end.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were all at the time. They were rather revolutionary because you just didn't. What do you mean? You're creating a new bourbon? And
Yeah, you're doing a
you're
premium
premium. What's
on
that?
top of your
And-
regular brands.
And that was just unheard of, and now it's the rage.
Yes.
So it's,
Although, according to things I've been seeing, apparently all of a sudden we are now in a bourbon bust.
Yes.
Yeah, we're kind of.
I
we've
wonder
hit the-
how manufactured that is.
Yeah, well, I wonder too, because I know part of it is there was an artificial boom because of COVID.
Yes.
Yep.
So is this a bust only compared to that, or are we going back to pre-1990s?
Well,
Well,
maybe these absurd bourbon prices will go away.
well, yeah, but
Hopefully.
the thing is, the newer generations, the millennials and the ones coming.
I don't think you
after-
can call them new anymore. They're old.
Well, but they are not bourbon drinkers.
Not all of them. My
there are some.
my eldest is
Yeah.
absolutely a bourbon
Oh no,
drinker.
my eldest is too, but they're very big on lots of other things too, and to be fair, they're rather cheap.
Well, that's because according
Yeah.
to millennials, they can't afford.
They can't
anything.
afford anything. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay.
Well, I mean, but everything's cyclical. I mean, for a
Yes.
while, vodka was the thing.
Yes, when we were in
Yes.
college, vodka was huge.
Yeah, vodka was huge. Tequila then had its
Or-
moment, and
and-
bourbon has a moment. And
Well, and
It's a
Everything
very
level-
long moment.
everything
and-
levels out.
and your
Eh.
malt liquor based non-malt liquors,
Oh yeah, and
Oh, yeah.
Zimas,
Yeah, they were
whatever. It's the-
well, and in the 60s and 70s,
Nuts.
whenever you to be classy in the
Club.
movies, you had a Scotch.
yes,
Now it'd be
Yeah.
a bourbon.
Yeah.
Scotch is just whiskey somebody burned the hell
Yeah.
out of.
Yeah,
Well,
for your Irish
so
friends,
so
though,
much for that crowd too.
Now the Scottish people are all
We're
turning out.
alienating everybody today.
for your
Well, it's a
I-
successful episode then.
Yes.
Welcome to America.
Yeah.
I am a fan though of Irish whiskey. I do like Jameson's.
Jameson is
Well, now,
excellent.
It's
the-
good.
Yes, it is.
Now,
It's very good.
I'm looking at this Heaven Hill 7-year bottled in bond, and the mash bill is 78% corn, 12% malted barley, and 10% rye.
So
There's
it's a
But-
low
pepper.
rye.
There's
Yeah.
It's a low rye.
Low
yeah.
rye.
Yes,
And
but
the corn,
nose
high
is
corn, yeah.
the nose is standard notes of vanilla, oak, and caramel. Lots of stone fruit, mainly pear and cherry, with faint walnuts and pecans. Now
Yeah, I
it's
wish I
got
was-
a quote cinnamon brown sugar spicy sweetness.
That's the sweetness you're
That's
picking
that
up.
Okay,
sweetness
brown
that I was
sugar-
picking up.
Brown sugar, I
I don't get a whole lot of the
I'll-
cinnamon.
I'll-
I don't
Yeah.
get any cinnamon out of it.
Yeah.
Although the cinnamon and the rye are going to blend together a bit.
Yeah. So
Because and of course that high of malted barley. I mean that's
Yeah.
a high malted barley.
yeah, and
That really tempers the rye.
Mhm.
Yeah, it does, and
the-
I think
the-
that's a unique
the-
combination.
yeah.
Yeah, because usually that might be the other way around.
And the finish is cinnamon and oak spice for days, with a sweet tobacco faintly in the background.
Cajun might be able to pull that out.
Yeah, I
Oh, and,
didn't-
and listeners, yes, we are missing our buddy
Yes.
Cajun. He is becalmed in the dry Tortugas. He's waiting for the wind to come back so he can sail and return to us here.
Yes.
yeah, what he's really doing is partying with the Mrs. Cajun.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I had a perfectly good lie going there.
Well,
Well,
He-
that
he-
doesn't mean he's not in the dry Tortugas.
yeah,
Uh,
but he's getting
becalmed.
busy with Mrs.
Yes.
Cajun while he's becalmed.
She's quite the
I'm
pirate too.
Yes, she is, yes.
I like the. Yeah.
While
the,
we're
the priority is for Mr. Cajun right now is getting Mr. Cajun serviced as opposed to working with us.
Well, I wouldn't have gone quite there, but all right.
So again, hold
Can't
that thought.
argue that.
Yes, hold that thought.
So,
So,
Can't fault him.
as he's had to be told twice to hold those thoughts.
yes, hold those thoughts. Yes, yes, that should be your default
Hold
when we are recording.
thoughts.
Hold.
He's like trying to sell cars. Hold.
Yes.
Anyways, I want to give a huge shout out to Mrs. Robert.
Mhm.
She helped
Monster
me
breakfast.
put together the menus for today.
We are all extreme fans of Mrs.
And
Roberts.
she and I
Yes,
put
very
together
much so.
breakfast this morning, contrary to what most of the people in this room thought.
I
Scotch
said not a word.
eggs.
I said not a word.
Scotch eggs. Delicious.
She did not do all of the work herself. It was very much a
Mm-hmm.
joint effort. Although I will say, she did not give herself nearly as much credit as she should.
But
have.
she's a humble, wonderful lady, and
But-
we love her a lot.
She had the idea because I was just going to do basic, egg, sausage, bacon, biscuits,
Mhm.
and she said, "Oh, let's do Scotch eggs," which was an absolutely wonderful idea.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
brilliant.
they're
Yeah,
delicious.
yeah.
It was.
You had to
Delicious.
prepare for that, though, right?
Oh, yes, that's
not
some
some-
preparation.
That's not something that you can just kind of pull out of the cupboard. You've got to,
Yeah.
you got to figure
Yes,
this out.
yes, because you've got to boil the eggs first.
Yeah.
You got to have enough sausage that you can wrap these eggs in. Then you've got to, prepare
Bread
the,
them.
the breading, which is not just dipping it in some breadcrumbs. You've got to roll it in flour, roll it in egg, and then roll it in the breadcrumbs.
And we praise Cajun for his culinary skills, but Robertius, you sir, are certainly second in line to that.
well, I don't know about that, but
but
but,
this
it-
is
it was
an
a-
extremely creative approach, and I
yes,
love
it
that.
was.
well, and all credit as far as the idea goes to Mrs. Robert for that,
Mhm.
and she put together. I did not have any hand in this except schlepping maybe a little bit. She's put together the stew that we will have for lunch.
Ah,
So we have 2 crock pots of beef stew
anticipatory.
cooking out
Yes,
there.
a little tease there.
I like it.
Um,
I like it.
But yes, she loves Snakes and Otters, even if she's only listened to 3 episodes.
I thought she was making her way through the whole thing.
She stopped after 3, apparently.
Damn.
I think 3 was enough.
Okay, yeah, there is a certain
Well, I mean,
Because I think,
overload
like
that comes.
Mrs. Martin, maybe we talk too much and won't shut up.
She does have to live
Mrs.
with
Francis
you.
wouldn't say that, but I know she thinks it.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
Our misses all have to live with us, so they hear this all the time. They don't need to pick it out for their entertainment.
Well,
and listen
they
to
hear one aspect of the Snakes and
Well,
Otters. They
I mean,
miss,
we've gotten together over the years so much
Yeah.
they've heard a
Yeah,
lot of it.
they're
Mhm.
familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have kind of encouraged and forced her to listen to a few on occasion, and she
Yeah.
has been quite the team player.
Well,
Well,
But
Mrs.
she's
Brother-
certainly never going to ask to listen. That's for sure.
Exactly.
Now,
Mrs.
something-
Brother Andre listens to it every week that it drops.
well, now something.
There you
I'd
go. Well, I
like-
knew I liked your wife for a good reason.
Something I'd like to
that's very
do
nice of her.
for future episodes is back number of years back, you guys did an episode, featuring me.
Yes.
Well,
And
yes,
we-
one of
we
our most
need-
popular. Yes.
that was like episode 58 or something.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
it was in the 50s. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was,
Yeah, and that was our first
But-
2-hour episode,
Yeah,
which
but
we've
what we
never
need-
done.
what we
well,
need to
2 hour
do-
that we didn't break up.
Yeah.
That's true. That's right.
And what
That's right.
we need to do is we need to do one on each of you all.
Oh.
The details of
Okay.
my life are quite inconsequential.
No, they're not. I
We
mean,
know you well enough.
and
we could prop this up.
But
That's not a
I
problem.
think we should really do that so
I
that
like
the,
that
the
idea.
listenership.
But we've already
can-
told
can
all of my
learn.
good stories because all
That's
of my
okay,
good
but
stories
they've been
include the
spread-
Imperator.
But they've been spread out.
That's right. Well, focus on Martin. I like this.
Yes.
Focus on Robert. Well, this is really
Yes.
cool, guys.
Yeah,
Don't
we
forget
need to
focus
do
on
that.
Francis.
Well, I'm wondering if that's not
And-
an
and
opportunity to
Andre
take pot
and
shots.
Cajun and-
well,
yes,
that's
all of
always an
us.
opportunity
Well,
for,
that's
on
right,
all
that's
of us.
We will be
That's
at Studio A and recording in March for the April episode,
Mm-hmm.
so maybe we can work that in.
I like that idea.
Yeah,
I
perhaps.
do.
I
Perhaps.
think it'd be great to have
But-
Hard pass.
the highlights
Well, you,
of each of us.
Martin is right, though. Almost all of our best stories we have talked about,
We've already
because
told.
even the ones that don't involve you, we've talked about quite a bit on the show. Now, and I
After
know,
240
Let's-
episodes,
if,
yeah,
guys.
if
spread out.
pressed, we could probably come up with more stuff.
Yeah.
But
Well, that would
honestly,
mean prep. you
all
know,
of
we
my
don't-
best stories involve the people in this room.
Well,
They very much do.
And plus your wife.
Other than
very much
joining,
Well,
right?
yes, but a lot of those stories I can't talk about in a mixed company.
I have no identity outside of my relationship to you all.
Well, and your wife.
that is a very Catholic approach, by the way.
Yes, it is.
It
It is.
We take identity from the body of Christ, and we take our
Uh-huh.
meaning, and which leads us back. I'm giving you a.
I know
here.
he was
Leads
teeing
us
me up,
back
leading us
to
right back
Camus
into it.
here.
Yes.
Is because
Oh, nice tie-in.
because I
Well,
think
we're rather absurd.
yes,
Uh,
you know,
very
the
much.
Catholic approach to me would really not find a whole lot of argument against Camus' absurdism, because it's looking at this world as simply this world.
Yes,
That's right. And the Catholics would agree that this world is absurd in
Well,
many ways.
Well,
but
it's
the
absurd.
break then is though that
He was
for
an
for
atheist.
for anyone religious, there is a structure and a meaning
Yes.
to our existence.
outside of this particular
But for an
plane.
absurdist, there isn't.
Well, the absurdism is by definition atheistic.
Yes.
Yes,
Oh,
it
he
is.
Yeah.
an
Oh,
atheist.
yes.
Yes.
Right. Well, see,
It-
we
it
haven't
is.
talked about that.
Yeah,
And I think
it's-
it needs to be called out.
So and that's where we're headed
Mhm.
because
Oh,
now it's
I knew you had a plan.
Yeah.
right now.
In
like I
Martin,
said,
we trust.
structure. So now it's time to talk about what's considered to be the three primary responses to the notion that the world is irrational.
Okay.
So the first response posited by absurdist thinkers and primarily Camus is suicide,
Mm-hmm.
which
Right.
is ultimately unsatisfactory because you're not coping, you're not dealing with the
Right.
the
That's a
notion-
very that's the Nietzschean roots. If you're not dealing with it, then you're
right,
a loser.
You're right. You're simply escaping,
Well,
opting out,
and
and,
the
that's
church would
not
have
a
some-
valid
the
response.
church would kind of agree with that, but they would certainly be not near that harsh. They're saying life
Well,
is
not anymore.
yeah. Well,
Well, one time we
there
were
was a
very
time
harsh.
they
on
were-
it.
we
Yes.
were well. I mean, it was. I mean, we could go into the roots of that, but that's its own freaking episode. But the intention is, if life is sacred, if that is a foundational belief,
But that's not the absurdist foundational belief.
well, that's
the
correct.
problem.
But the church would say,
Yes.
but it should be.
It should be.
Yeah.
And
And the absurdists would agree. They say, that's an invalid
It's an invalid response,
response. That's thank you.
to
Yeah.
the realization of the irrational, absurd world.
Mm-hmm.
and
Because it isn't a response; you're just opting out.
Yeah.
and this I think is the problem with both existentialists and absurdists.
Yeah.
And honestly, with a lot of philosophers from the Enlightenment on, because a lot of them are atheistic in their outlook.
Right.
Not necessarily always, but
Mm-hmm.
it's certainly a very common theme.
They
It's
may not
often-
swim in the water, but they'll dip their toes in.
Yeah, it was
certainly.
often a search for the alternative to
Yes.
religion because religion had let them down.
Right. Well, especially when you start talking about the Enlightenment, because that comes right after the wars of religion in Europe.
Yes,
yes.
And the Protestant rebellions.
Heathens.
I'm smiling. This is an audio podcast, but I'm
Yes.
smiling when he
But-
says that.
You mean the Reformation, Robert?
No, the Protestant rebellions.
Mm.
So, but anyways,
We haven't really done episodes on that, but we've
Yeah.
got plans for
yes,
those.
yes, that is something we
is-
really should cover.
Is that like calling the Civil War the War of Northern Aggression?
No, because there's still more of us than them, so I think we still won. I mean,
Yeah,
we
well-
lost in the sense that we lost the entirety of Northern Europe.
Well,
but,
it's interesting you say that, Imperator. Not to go down a rabbit hole, but I will.
but we will.
But you all remember in our early days of doing genealogical historical research,
Mm-hmm.
we have the entire corpus of records from the Civil War
Yeah,
that
we
have
do.
been bound, and they are called the records of the War of the Rebellion
Mm-hmm.
because they were
Yes.
published by the winners.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, anyways, one of the things that because you know me, I don't necessarily like, but my mind goes to where I see the flaws in these particular philosophies.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the problems I have with existentialism and absurdism, and Nietzsche and on, they are so narrow in their view of the world, and I think absurdism especially is very narrow.
Well, it's an absolutist of viewpoint, isn't it?
In many ways, they all are.
Well, that's kind of what I'm.
But
I mean,
the
it's-
thing is,
yeah,
it's
kind of a shoulder
it's
shrug.
entirely materialistic in the sense that not that it's concerned with wealth and gain of stuff. It is concerned only with the material world. That's what I mean by materialistic.
It's experiential.
very important that you
Very
distinction there.
experiential. Yes.
It's we can experience all of this. I can't experience anything else,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's agnostic. It's atheistic. It's intellectual. It's what I can know,
It's very
and
materialistic.
what I can't know, kind of thing.
Right.
Not as in materialism,
Yeah,
but that the material world.
I'm not a big fan of calling it intellectual, not because I think it's stupid,
Living in the material world.
but I have a
Oh,
problem
dear
with that
Lord.
because it by giving one
Lord, he's singing
school of
Madonna.
thought that label, it implies that all other schools of thought are not intellectual.
Well, you know, you've hit a
And-
very. I'm finished, but I've got an idea.
Yeah. And I refute that by doing one thing: Thomas Aquinas.
And
There is
Right.
no greater intellectual, in my opinion, than Thomas Aquinas.
Right. and we're going. That's the next response, right?
So that focus only on that experiential, and perhaps the horrors that are experienced. Maybe that's one of the things that because the war in Algeria for independence was not exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, they're never nice.
No.
You
yeah,
know?
and it was especially not kind of Geneva Convention type
Right.
rules things.
And
It
then,
was
you know-
very very dirty war.
Being part of the underground against Nazis in World War II. Again, you're talking about something. You're fighting against something that is incredibly horrible.
Mhm.
Although in France, they didn't see nearly the horror that east of them did,
Yeah,
because they just took all their Jews and took them somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right.
So they just disappeared. And it's real easy to convince yourself, like, oh well, they've just moved them.
That's what they
Now-
told them.
Yes,
Concentration camps.
yes, and concentration was literally to concentrate them all in one place.
That's
Yes.
right. Which that has become its own. The connotation of that word is vastly different than what it was originally put together
Yeah.
for. It's become a
Wow.
dirty word for the right reasons.
For the right reasons.
But it was literally they were in a very German way. Well, this is what it is, so we're going to call it this.
Mhm.
Right. So that is my problem with that, because the whole idea that you are searching for meaning and can't find it in itself is an admission that there is something beyond what you can see.
Mhm.
And I say this because if you can conceive it, I don't think it's something that is totally. I mean, you can conceive, like a flying spaghetti monster, Cthulhu. That's usually what they call a flying spaghetti monster.
okay.
And yes, that is something that does not exist in the real world, but it is an idea, a thing that you have now. And again, that's made up.
Well,
We would say that
that's-
our faith is not made up.
that's the argument that the
Mhm.
atheists will use, the flying spaghetti monster.
Right, exactly.
Because I thought it doesn't mean it's real.
Oh yeah, the appeal to your sky god.
Right.
Yes.
Or the old man in the sky or whatever. Your imaginary friend is another term I see used.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But that it's almost a universal thing, though, that search for meaning.
Yeah.
It is.
So therefore, if it's a universal, I think that because I see order in the rest of the universe, because the universe works on laws. There are physical laws of nature, laws of physics and science, mathematics. All of these point to an order in the universe. And
That the natural world operates under.
yes, that the natural world operates under. And if things were truly meaningless, if chaos was truly the source of everything, chaos does not entropy down to order. It actually works the other way around.
Then life would
Order entropy's down to chaos.
Chaos.
If chaos were an absolute rule, life would never exist. It would be impossible.
Yes.
But life succeeds in the face of entropy.
Well, only under certain conditions, because you can look out in the universe. We've not found a single piece of life yet.
We are here.
Yes,
We're here.
So, yeah, that's right, and that which is an argument that means to go towards
So-
what Robert is saying.
So
is
right, I mean, you guys,
the existence of
actually-
life itself is a form of proof for the Creator and for the order. Now, that's the argument.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Martin's been trying to get a word in edgeways.
Well,
here.
I just I love that you took that first response, the suicide response,
Mhm.
and built on it really the response to the second classic response is religious conversion. He consider absurdists consider that really the second possibility for response is a religious conversion, because
Mhm.
then you're seeking that as the way to structure
Yes.
the world.
The search for meaning, just to quote Viktor Frankl, is man's search for meaning
Mhm.
is an extension and a response to the absurdist nature of the universe. That's what Camus is saying.
I don't know that Frankel is specifically responding to absurdists, but
Not at all, but
I think it
simply
certainly
using the-
can be. Yes,
simply using the quote because it's really cool.
it is.
Right. So that's the classic second response is the religious conversion,
Mhm.
which to an absurdist, that's sort of there. At least you're doing something
understandable.
positive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's understandable, but
grasping at straws, perhaps.
And it's still a denial, though.
See, that's
Still
the
a
thing.
denial.
This is one of the things that always amazes me, and this is the flaw I see in the position.
Yep.
Because he rails against Marxist-Leninists for being absolutists, but absurdists are absolutists.
On the other,
In that there is
In the
no
other-
meaning, and there can be no meaning.
And anything that tries to find it
Is
automatic,
wrong.
is automatically wrong,
Yes. Yeah.
flawed,
Yes.
Well,
false,
because it's
created, whatever.
to the absurdist, you're not truly dealing with the idea that the universe is irrational.
But that's it. Their
You're
supposition, their starting point
Mhm.
is that it absolutely is irrational.
Emphasis on the word absolute, I think.
Yes.
interesting.
And
Very
therefore they're not open, and which is a very bad thing for a philosopher to be. The absurdist position is not open to any counter arguments, because their counter argument is always going to be, well, you're not dealing with the fact that it's irrational. They are presuming the argument. What's the Latin term for this?
Oh, I don't recall, but yes, I understand. Yes, you're
A priori is
Yeah.
part
Yeah,
of
a priori. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that which precedes. Yes.
that's kind of that Kantian position, isn't it? Or
Well,
Hegelian. That's Hegelian, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, you take a
I don't
position
know.
and you presume. I mean, it's basic geometry and mathematics. You create it. You postulate something, and from with that postulate, because you can't prove it.
But in
Robert's,
science,
Robert's contention though is that the absurdist
Yeah, their initial position is flawed.
But they're proving something they've already in their minds proven.
yes,
Well, yeah, and
Because they're
they
not-
accept no arguments against it.
Yeah, they're
like
they're,
a Hitchens and a Dawkins.
They're arguing from a position that they refuse to argue about.
well, and isn't that kind of the position for all philosophy? We take a position, and then we work from that.
Work from it. You have to
Yeah.
work from a supposition of some
Right,
sort.
and that's
Well-
a scientific method in many
But
ways.
see, the idea of absurdism, though, you would start with the supposition that there is no supposition, and work from that.
Well, but it is a dogmatic statement in
It
and of
is.
That's right.
itself.
That's
in and of
stated-
itself.
Yeah, that's
right.
right.
and maybe that's why I harp on some of these things so much, is that, although for in the Enlightenment, for Voltaire, one of the things that I dinged him for was not because I thought that the principles of the Enlightenment were wrong or bad, but that for especially the early and for much of the intellectuals, this is true, because you look at modern intellectuals, their philosophies, their ideas are for the privileged, and whether that means financially or intellectually, it is not for the dumb masses.
With a few exceptions, I think Marxism kind of works.
Well,
towards
no,
that.
because I think Marxism is the best example
No.
of not for the dumb masses.
Exactly.
But they
because
just
You have
pretend
to
be.
rule them.
Because
The ruling class has to be there for the
Well,
communism.
Well, yeah, in
Well,
Bolshevism and
totalitarian-
Leninism, sure, but I'm
Yes.
trying to wrap my arms
for
around
the
how-
Marxists, though,
Yeah.
the dialectic,
Yeah,
which is that the argument that history is moving toward this one position of this true Marxist reality,
Yeah.
which is never going to happen,
Yeah.
and there is no other.
Yeah, because at its core, it is a denial of human nature.
It is.
Mhm.
It is, and I think in some ways absurdism is too, because it denies. It calls out as false one of the core principles
It
that man
denies
lives
that
by.
we're seekers.
Yes.
It denies that.
Well, it doesn't deny that we're seekers, but it says
denies
that,
that we're George Taylor.
but it denies, I
Yes.
think, that the seeking is a good thing.
is worthwhile. That
Yeah.
the seeking is worthwhile.
Seeking's a waste
and
of
then-
time.
And
Well,
that
that's
is
Tennyson too. To
so the-
strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield.
Yes, good.
Yep. So the third premise, the third response is what Camus would call rebellion.
Yes.
Mhm.
It's
Revolt.
It's an acceptance of the idea that the world is irrational
Mhm.
and absurd, but that you then move forward from there
Mhm.
and make your life from that. And let me just give you this. So, defenders of the rebellious response to absurdism have pointed out that despite its possible shortcomings, it has one important advantage over many of its alternatives. It manages to accept the absurd for what it is without denying it by rejecting that it exists or stopping one's own existence. So, so
Repeat that.
defenders of the rebellious response to absurdism have pointed out that despite its possible shortcomings, it has one important advantage over many of its alternatives. It manages to accept the absurd for what it is without denying it by rejecting that it exists or by stopping one's own existence.
So the reason that it's valid is because it's not the other two approaches. That's
Yeah,
what I'm hearing. You know,
it doesn't.
it's not one or
Because
two.
a religious
therefore
a religious conversion is a denial that
That's
the word is
okay.
That's
is
number two.
irrational.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
And number one was suicide. Yeah.
and suicide's unfulfilling because you're just opting out. That's the coward's
But
way
see,
out.
So
and I think that's the oxymoron in the position,
Yep.
is that if it's unfulfilling, why is that even a thing? Because that implies meaning, in my opinion.
well, certainly
It
the
is.
search for it,
It
or the
is,
desire
and
for
it
it,
is, and
or
it
the need
is.
for it.
Absurdism then becomes this very difficult thing to wrap around because of that. Because Robert's exactly right. We are seekers of something. We're all seekers because if you're not a seeker, you're opting out. You're taking option one, and you're
Well, either literally or being simply being disengaged.
yeah. And so that's the hard part that for me of coming to grips with this as well is what am I seeking? I'm not sure. I don't know, but I know I'm seeking,
Mm-hmm.
and I have to understand that I'm seeking in a world constructed of the will of 8 billion individuals doing whatever the hell they please.
No.
And a lot of that is then a lot of those things come into conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Hence the Nietzschean issues of the applications of power.
And not to make this an ad hominem reflection, but I believe that might be a personal reflection on you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And again, that's the appeal of this philosophy and why I felt like I found something that fit.
Really?
A little
Oh,
bit.
do tell, sir.
Is,
I can see that for,
Yeah,
for,
I
for
can
Martin.
see that.
yeah.
But
Yeah. Knowing full well though too that I've got three Aquinas educated philosophers here to challenge me,
Well,
or at least
well,
two.
well, I mean, it sounds
And a third that's a very
But,
generous,
mean,
there's
decent
no-
human being.
no question in my mind, though. This is essentially a zero-sum approach, because absurdism says you got three choices: door number one, door number two, number three, and that's your 100%.
And
Well,
two of the three,
Two of them are flawed.
Are
Well, then,
pointless.
Well,
deeply
because
flawed.
the only one, the only
Yeah,
one that has any value, is
disengagement, delusion, or acceptance
So the
from their perspective.
the absurdists must be going nuts with the current press going on about how, we're going to have forced religious conversions of your children in schools here in the U.S.
Yes. Oh my god.
Well, yeah, because that's that's
But that's part of again.
that's part of accepting
part
the,
of my
Yes.
the absurdist. I live in this absurd irrational world where people are making this kind of crap up and then have a forum to spout it. It's like, God, you all take a Valium, go lie down, get laid or something, and relax.
Have you all seen the TV series Landman?
yes.
No.
Most
I
of you.
haven't
not
watched
watched
it.
If you haven't
actually.
seen it, it's
It is
phenomenal. It is phenomenal, and I'm going to give you the quote, and you'll love it. There's a scene where Billy Bob Thornton is there with his ex-wife, and they go into a hospital room, and she's just going nuts. He says, "Sweetheart, I know you've got a Valium in you somewhere. Go out to the hall, take it, and come back when you feel better."
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
come
I think
back.
and I look at my wife. I says, that's going to be used at some point.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you'll slip
I
on the
highly
couch.
recommend you do not.
No,
use
no. But
Go-
That's a good.
go-
That's a good way for you to end up in the ER quickly.
correctly. That's
There
correct.
was, I mean,
It was brilliant. It was
yeah.
brilliant, right?
the Big Bang Theory, where Howard first introduces Bernadette to his mother,
Oh yeah.
and it's
Mom.
the doctor writes him a script for Xanax. You brought a Catholic girl home to meet your Jewish mother. Here, how about I write you a script for Xanax?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So, and I just,
but
you guys have been talking
that is a
about-
form of checking out. That is
yeah.
a form of
Oh yeah.
option
But
one.
That's the reason I wanted to do this episode. And again, in an hour, we just barely skimmed the surface.
But you know what?
But because you guys have been talking about, well, let's hear about Martin. Let's hear about Martin and what makes Martin tick. And I just want to tell you that here's a place where I found that it's starting to make sense for me.
So
And I
you
want
are
to explore it.
you are a firm believer in door number 3.
Well,
Yes, acceptance that the world is irrational and absurd, and in small ways find a way to have rebellion against that.
I
And
submit.
seeking and
Mhm.
having you guys challenge me
Mm-hmm.
is a form of my rebellion.
Well, see, therein lies the piece I don't think
Okay.
we've adequately laid out. All 3 of these doors, A, B, and C, they all accept the
Mhm.
premise that life is absurd and
Yes.
irrational.
Well,
all 3
no.
of them do.
So
well,
No,
As
No,
far as
so
he,
then-
as
two
far
is a
as-
partial.
no.
two rejects it because 2 is a religious conversion
but it
Okay.
to find your
but-
meaning and to see that there is a rational.
but it deals.
However,
with,
this-
they all 3 deal with the
Okay.
question.
But the second half of 2 is that it's a denial of the fact of irrationality.
Now,
Yeah.
I want
So-
to know something from Martin though.
Okay,
How do you reconcile this with your work life?
Because he works in the courts.
Because he works in the government. So you're talking about you're embracing rebellion. You can see the absurdity, but where's the rebellion in
Hold
your work
on,
life?
hold on. You're
because
talking
I
about,
do a better job than everybody around me.
but well, yeah.
Well, your
Thank you, Ron Swanson.
Your
Um,
meaning is in excellence.
But
Mm-hmm.
That-
you're
yeah.
you're conflating rebellion with just
with rule breaking,
with rule breaking for
with
the
law
sake of
breaking,
it.
rule
Well, no,
breaking.
For the sake of it, and that's
No,
not what
no,
Camus is
no, no.
talking about.
Because he works in a totalitarianistic bureaucracy.
Anybody who works in a totalitarian.
I mean, everybody has a everybody.
Preach.
to a point.
Point, yes.
Unless you run your own business, you're working in a bureaucracy of
Well,
some
yeah.
sort.
Well, then you're the
But
head of your own
mine is
totalitarian.
You're the unity.
Yeah, mine is a bureaucracy that believes in second chances.
But
Okay.
see, the thing is, though, because I think what
Your
you're missing,
personal bureaucracy or the where you work.
Where I work.
Okay,
Okay.
make sure. Just be clear.
what I think what the imperator is either purposely or mistakenly missing. Because sometimes the imperator
Purposely, yeah.
will purposely
So
miss
both are.
stuff for the sake of his
He
point.
does not see me as a rule breaker.
Right.
Well,
and-
none of
and-
us.
and-
I mean, there's a
well,
truism.
And that I think is part of his point. Though.
Yeah, I mean,
But the thing that
I don't
is-
object.
right.
Yeah, exactly.
But the thing about Camus' rebellion, his revolt, is that he was for revolting, rebelling against any kind of oppression
Mhm.
and injustice,
Okay.
whatever respects the human condition, whatever violates the inherent dignity
You
of the
can
human
say, yeah.
person.
Right.
Oh,
I mean,
really?
He was.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, I mean,
Huh.
we just, as far as personal beliefs and things he worked
Yes.
toward until his death, we really didn't even touch upon. You know,
Mhm.
again, he was anti-atomic warfare. He
Well, yeah.
was very much like we mentioned here, just sort of this European.
Well, there's a
unity-
humanism around.
Yeah,
him.
there-
It's
there-
very-
yeah,
He's a
that's-
moralist. It would
Yeah,
be
Yeah.
in the best sense of
Uh,
both words. Yeah.
And again, it very much shaped by responses to Sartre and Kierkegaard,
Mhm.
who are responses to Nietzsche and Hegel before that, and who are responses to Kant
Yeah.
before that. So, you know, there is a chain there. There is a stream towards which you hit.
Well, and part of the problem with philosophy in that respect, Western philosophy, it has become each successive generation is a response to the last.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, there's
and-
a skepticism that comes with every generation
Well,
about
and
what
the-
went before.
Yeah, and the problem with that, and that has infected all of society, really.
Very much so.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And the problem with that is that all you keep doing is narrowing.
Yes.
And as you narrow, you're not narrowing to the greatest good, to the thing that, provides for the common good and what have you. You're narrowing to the almost the most negative view of the world.
The
Well,
least
because you're
common
throwing out-
denominator.
Because you're yes, in many ways,
Yeah.
yeah. Because you're throwing out what might be good. You're throwing out the baby with the bathwater, basically.
Yeah.
Well, it's a very Protestant attitude, which I was going. One of the things I was wanting to say earlier, because in the Catholic universe, everything is both and.
Yes.
There's the expression of it's all of the above, whereas in Protestantism lives and dies by
An
it-
either or.
an either or
And-
approach.
How can
and
we be different from the other?
that's right.
In the last 400 or 500 years of
there's
philosophy,
always a form of denial
yes,
that
and
is built into that attitude. Well, it cannot be this.
Mm-hmm.
yes,
Therefore, it must be that. Where in the Catholic approach, and it's perfectly understood by that C word, Catholic, little c, universal, saying, no, we recognize there's a lot of stuff we simply do not know. We're not going to deny the presence of the Spirit is the language we would use.
right.
And the power
again,
of the Spirit.
Which is how we get to the absurdism.
Yeah.
Is that, well, I can't see, taste, touch, or hear the Spirit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, I cannot derive meaning from it.
Right.
Which
And-
because they've thrown out.
That's
all
right.
of that.
And it's very much, if you can't see it, if you can't touch it, it don't exist. That Catholics, we reject that. Say, no, we recognize there can be.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, we're going to allow the possibility that there is.
And if you want to say, well, that's silly on its face, well, science has proven that principle is true.
Mm-hmm.
Think about all the things we cannot see, taste, touch, hear, or smell
Mm-hmm.
that make up the world
that
around
we,
us.
that we accept as being reality.
There are
Yeah.
more things in heaven and earth, Horatio,
mean-
than are dreamt of in your philosophy. I mean, that's Shakespeare.
Right.
I love that. Thank you, Francis.
It's from Hamlet. It's one of my very
Mhm.
favorites.
Oh yeah. I think Brother Andre had something, and then we will conclude.
I was just going to go back to your model of absurdism with door A, B, or C that we've constructed.
Mm-hmm.
That totally denies the fact that there could be a door D, E, F, G, or to infinity that leads to the truth. And going back to Francis's comment that there could be multiple doors that lead to the truth.
But that's the thing, though.
There is
They
no
have
truth.
totally rejected the idea that
That's right.
there can be other.
It's very Protestant.
Yeah.
It's got to be one of three, and nothing else is
Yeah.
possible.
Well,
Yeah.
there's
Well,
no
I mean,
truth.
That's the three primary responses
Mm-hmm.
that are in Camusian's thought. But there other philosophers who have built on this did say that, okay, well, maybe there are some other routes here.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to end on sort of Robert's, insight that, philosophers tend to reject everything. The present tends to reject everything good about the past with the idea of we'll make a better future. But if you're forgetting all the good stuff in the past, what are you building a better
Right.
future
All you
on?
have left
Yeah.
is the negative.
Yes. So, listeners, again, that's an hour plus and
Mhm.
just barely scratched the surface.
112.
Yep. And so look up
Pissed
Camus.
off a lot of audience.
Half the world.
Yes.
So Amish, you can go to the library and find books on this. The rest of you can look it up on your phones.
And there went our Amish listeners.
yeah.
No,
that
no.
was respectful.
That was
It was.
respectful.
It was
All right, that's
I
cool.
mean,
They're
they are
going-
allowed to use cell phones for commerce because it's the modern world. They have to.
But they
Depends on
They're
depends
not
on the
going to be looking
community.
up absurdism on them.
Right.
Yeah.
They're not
So
playing
they'll need
Candy
a book.
Crush.
Get the
Yeah.
dictionary out.
They're going to go to the library and get books. So I encourage you, listeners,
Mhm.
and then you can email us if you have some thoughts on this.
Or send us a letter.
Or send us a letter.
Letter,
Well,
write
we
it
don't-
on the back of the buggies, and maybe the
And
Imperator.
I should pass by it sometime.
Pass by.
1700 Pennsylvania Avenue.
So, Francis, my buddy, what's next time, man?
Well, we're going to go quotation. It's going to be code of honor next time around here.
Mhm.
Robert has not Robert gets this delay on this one here. He
Yep.
gets to be the one to put it down.
Yes, I am the captain.
That's right, and he has not yet revealed. And I
gonna
think
go-
there's a little tease.
AKA he
we're
isn't
gonna go into
selected.
it cold.
What was that?
We're going
AKA
into it.
he has not selected the quote. As
I have a large number that I am trying to choose from. I was
Okay.
also going to wait until we went through this to see if something out of that also piqued my.
I like that
my
approach. I
interest.
really do. I
Mhm.
think that's very.
Oh, yeah.
Dare we say it? Let the Holy Spirit lead us.
Yes,
I'm
let's
totally
go
over
for
that.
chaos.
So, and
Oh, God.
next episode, one other item I'd like to bring up. I want an update on writing projects next episode.
Oh,
Ah,
okay.
okay,
All right.
yes.
Yeah,
All right.
we'll make
Yes.
room for that. Sure.
Mhm.
All right.
Yes.
So be with us next time.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions. Remember, new episodes drop every second and fourth Friday at 6 a.m. Eastern, just in time for your morning commute. And every fifth Friday, we drop a special Hoopajube episode. Spread the word we are on all the major platforms, and leave us a review. That helps others find us. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, as well as our website, snakesandotters.com. Join us next time. Same snake time, same otter channel.